see me move funny. I've had back spasms the last few days.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the beginning of our last session here today. We're really excited to have you. You're hearing okay? The mics are, I'm seeing signs. Okay, thumbs up. We're really excited to have you all. We know it's been a long day, and so thank you for joining us in this last session, in which we're going to first have a conversation among policymakers and really try to dig into some of the policymaker experiences and policymaker perspectives around our topic of the day, which is transforming education systems for and through inclusive education. And then this will be followed by a session that will really center youth voice as the last voice that we hear in our symposium of the day and that we carry with us as we move on and out into our work. So I want to, again, welcome you all. My name is Jennifer O'Donoghue. I am a senior fellow and the deputy director of the Center for Universal Education at Brookings. I want to welcome the online folks, welcome the in-person folks, and invite you all to comment on this session using the hashtag transform4 inclusion. So transform4inclusion with the number 4. Please get involved in the conversation. And want to welcome this really wonderful panel that we have joining us on my left, Minister Marie-Céline Zialor, who's the Minister for Youth, Sports and Family from the Republic of Seychelles. Thank you for making the long journey here to DC to join us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure. And I'm bringing the Seychelles sunshine to DC.
And we appreciate that. And on my far right is the Minister Maralitzo Wirima, who's the Minister of Education from Malawi. Minister, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you very much.
On my left again, we have the Minister of Education and Sciences from Paraguay, Luis Fernando Ramírez. Bienvenido, Ministro.
Muchas gracias por invitarme.
Thank you for the invitation. And on my right, Willie Jett, the Commissioner from the United States State of Minnesota Department of Education. Commissioner, sorry.
Thank you for the invitation, and I did not bring the weather from Minnesota.
Can tell.
We can also thank you for that, and as someone who left Minnesota more than 20 years ago, well, maybe 30 years ago now, I appreciate that. You know, the focus of today's symposium has been around transforming systems for and through inclusive education. And at CUE, we understand this transformation to mean fundamentally rebuilding systems around a clear and shared purpose among actors across education ecosystems, from policymakers to administrators to educators, civil society and community organizations, the private sector, and importantly, families and young people themselves. So I'd like us to start our conversation today by exploring a little about what this has looked like for all of you in your own education systems. And I'm going to start, Minister Wirima, with you. And you know, when we spoke a few weeks ago in the lead up to this conversation today, you highlighted that inclusive education is closely aligned with Malawi's Vision 2063. Mm-hmm. Could you share with us more about how Malawi is defining inclusion, how you're working to develop a shared sense of purpose around inclusion, and really bring that vision from paper into practice?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, it is true that our vision for national development in Malawi, Malawi 2063, is to become an inclusively wealthy, self-reliant, upper middle income country by 2023. So there's all of inclusively, that's for everyone. Now in our National Education Sector Investment Plan, which we fondly call NESIP, running from 2020 to 2030, we purpose to provide equitably accessible quality education and improved governance. We have now gone further to draft a national inclusive education policy and have in place a national inclusive education strategy, which is under review. Moderator, our understanding of inclusive education has metaphors, hence the review of strategies in line with the new philosophy. We see inclusive education as a process of reforming the education system, cultures, policies, and practices to address and respond to diverse needs of our learners. Just to say that my ministry is, just as moderator, that is what we have preoccupied ourselves with lately. Various efforts are underway to mainstream inclusive education, including teacher education and digitalization. so that every trained teacher and school is enabled to identify and support learners with special educational needs and disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. And
I was trying to see if I was within my 3 minutes. I was looking around for the timekeeper, and I couldn't see her. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I want to pick up on something that you mentioned around cultures, policies, and practices.
Yes.
And I think that framing is really key. And actually, Minister Zieler, I'm going to turn to you because when we talked, you spoke about yourself as a disruptor and really seeing your role as a policy actor as disrupting cultural norms, beliefs, and mindsets. So I would love if you could share with us what this disruption has meant for you in relation to inclusive education and particularly in this idea of trying to create a shared sense of purpose around inclusive education in Seychelles. And importantly, what works to change sort of mindsets, beliefs, and norms, and what doesn't work so well?
Oh, well, it has landed me a lot of trouble, but good trouble. I want to state as well, I'm not the Minister for Education. I don't want any more trouble because it was misunderstood in another group. I am the Minister for Youth, Sports and Family.
Yes.
So taking on inclusivity, inclusive education itself is disruptive because I'm not the Minister for Education. There you go. So for me, it has been doing this outside of your mainstream system and not doing it because of the readiness of the country, but also of the barriers. And my philosophy approach is not to fight the existing system, but to create something different, better, so that then what exists becomes obsolete. So for us, it has been collaboration, but doing it through sports, evidently, and as well as looking at different public-private partnerships so that we can get people not to talk about inclusivity, but to see what it looks like. So, for example, with our national team, swimming team, it's inclusive, it's unified sports. And when they compete in different international competitions, there are no categories. And, you know, they compete with other athletes, and that has been disruptive, but it has worked. And I think Dr. Shriver mentioned that this morning, that it's good for everyone on the team, and it's good for, as well, the parents and everybody as well, and the schools to be able to see that is happening in sports, and it can also happen in the classroom. And the classroom is everywhere. The classroom is not restricted to four walls. And I think we learn best, and education is not the definition for me that it is for most people. So I think Dr. Shriver talked about that as well. So I feel right at home. I think because I'm among my tribe, my unicorn tribes. So it's that, and it has meant that we have gone and doing things, off the system, but also bringing new different stimuli in the country, so that, but fun kind of stimuli, so that people do not have much resistance to it. So I see I have 30 seconds. So this is what it has meant for us, and I think that we're slowly getting there, but we are, but differently to in the mainstream.
Great. Thank you, Minister. And I'm going to turn now to Minister Ramirez. And your team really talks about inclusive education in Paraguay as focusing on three things: disability, language, and socioeconomic background. And I'm wondering if you could share with us a bit about how you've worked in Paraguay to develop a sense of purpose around inclusion that really sits at the intersection of those three. Who've been your allies in that? Who might be missing from the work that you've been doing? And I'm going to translate it to Spanish. So, Ministro, su equipo habla de una educación inclusiva en Paraguay que se centra en la discapacidad, el idioma y el entorno socioeconómico. ¿Podrías compartir con nosotros un poco sobre cómo ha trabajado para desarrollar un sentido de propósito común en torno a la inclusión en la intersección de estos tres? ¿Y quiénes han encontrado como aliados clave en ese trabajo? ¿Y quiénes faltan todavía que se deben incluir?
Lo más importante que nosotros pudimos aprender en este tiempo es empezar desde otra visión, no desde el hacer, sino desde el ser. Cuando gestionamos espacios de convivir, espacios de estar, y la maestra puede darse cuenta que no era tan complicado, no era tan complejo, porque logró incluir, esa maestra va a incluir para siempre. Y eso se puede dar en el deporte, eso se puede dar en el arte. Entonces, gestionamos unos espacios distintos a los de la escuela tradicional, que de por sí son excluyentes, y gestionamos unos espacios a través del deporte donde encontramos aliados a toda la sociedad, los padres, la comunidad, los ministerios. 22 organizaciones gubernamentales se aliaron en este programa, en este sistema, y nuestro gran partner para llevar adelante esto fue Olimpiadas Especiales, que con quienes pivoteamos y desarrollamos toda la actividad al interior de 150 escuelas. Entonces, el gran cambio es salirnos del sistema tradicional y gestionar espacios dentro de la escuela en donde damos apertura de la escuela para todos los niños sin condición, sin clase social, y que puedan participar activamente en arte, deporte y todas las acciones que durante el tiempo del currículum el currículum no permite.
Thank you. So the minister talked about how in their work they decided to start from another perspective and really thinking about inclusion and promoting inclusion and a purpose around inclusion through experiences of inclusion. So that when teachers could start to see that they would have a first moment of an inclusive experience, that they would think, oh, I can bring this to the other work that I'm doing. And that one of the key pieces that they found in that work is that they needed to work outside of schools. So they've started their work in other spaces, and I'll come back and ask more about this in just a moment. But because schools themselves, the structure of schools is exclusionary, and so what they really wanted was to create spaces outside of that where they could work with allies across the ecosystem that include parents, other community members. They've created an alliance of 23 nonprofit NGOs in the space who are coming together and have been working with a great partner in Special Olympics. They have this program, and again, I'll ask another question about it to follow up, in 150 schools currently, but the big change that they've seen is that they needed to leave the traditional system, create spaces, open up those spaces, access for all through arts and sports and other types of activities to create inclusive experience as a starting point to build a sense of purpose around inclusion. Gracias.
Gracias.
Okay, Commissioner Jett. When we spoke with you, you defined inclusion as ensuring access and opportunity for all students that builds up their self-worth and spirit, and ensuring a seat at the table for folks who don't always have one. Could you share with us a bit more about what this has meant for the education system, how you've tried to get others in Minnesota on board with this vision of inclusion, and how shared do you think that vision of inclusion is currently in Minnesota?
So first off, it's great questions. And I just appreciate this opportunity to share our vision of inclusion in education in the state of Minnesota. So, excuse me, in our schools, inclusion goes beyond just providing access and opportunity. It's about nurturing self-worth. It's about spirit. It's about virtuosities in every student. Every student has a gift. We believe every student has a gift. We believe every student has something to be celebrated. And we also believe that students have something to contribute to society and to the world. Our responsibility as adults, as educators, is to help students to identify their gifts, their virtuosities, and then nurture them throughout their educational journey in schools. However, we also believe that inclusive education involves families and community. We can't do this work alone or in silos, and we believe that giving everyone, especially those who have been marginalized, a seat at the table. One thing I know is Minnesota, we set goals each year for increasing inclusion of students with disabilities in our general education settings through a plan that through all of our state agencies, it's called the Olmstead Plan in the state of Minnesota. And Minnesota sets goals each year with our federal administration and the U.S. Department of Education special education programming. One of the things that I know at Minnesota we're focusing on is integrating all school, family, and community as parts of a student's life through something called our person-centered planning. Person-centered planning in the state of Minnesota is both an approach that values the whole child or the young adult and the people that's in their life. And it provides the systemic supports and a way to bring all these people together to provide support for young people, their families, for that assistance or that help to help them be successful in their school and their community. But one thing I'd say is implementing this vision, you asked the question, no, has it been easy? The answer to that is no. We've had challenges, as I'm sure everybody has. You have the entrenched mindsets, you have outdated practices, and we've had to educate our educators, our administrators, the community at large about the importance and the benefits of inclusion. We've been providing, she told me 30 seconds, we've been providing training, resources, and ongoing support to ensure that everyone is equipped in this journey. And I just feel fortunate in the state of Minnesota that that foundation for inclusivity in our education system is there. And the one thing I just want to say is inclusion should not just be a buzzword. Okay? It should be a fundamental principle that drives everything that we do in education. It's about recognizing the inherent worth and the potential of every individual, of every young people, or of every young person, and then creating that environment where they can all thrive.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think, you know, that your phrase and principle around person-centered planning really resonated. I think Minister Zia-Laura and I were in the workshop on the intersections of gender and disability, and I think that really came out as sort of our final reflection is the need to really move into that space of person-centered and human-centered planning. I want to say to everybody, did my microphone just go out?
Yes, it did.
I want to just say to let everyone know that I'm going to do one more round of questions and then open up to all of you. So start preparing, thinking about what your questions might be. And in the meantime, I just want us to continue here. And, you know, this morning, my colleague Chris Johnstone talked about the importance of positive disruptors and those practices that can interrupt the status quo or historical ways of doing things within a system to support or catalyze greater inclusion. And, you know, in the conversations that we had over the last few weeks, you know, in preparation for this panel today, several of you spoke about sort of the multidimensional approaches that you're taking to inclusive education, focusing, for example, on a range of skills, knowledge, mindsets through different types of activities such as reading, writing, arts, music, dance, sports. And Minister Ramirez, you spoke just now about the need to leave the sort of traditional school space and start to work on inclusion in other spaces that could become that type of positive disruptor. So I wanted to turn back to you and just ask if you could tell us more about the Open Schools Initiative and, you know, that looks to involve communities in inclusive education spaces during holiday periods or weekends. And in particular, curious to know how you're approaching inclusion in these spaces. And then what, if anything, you feel like impact of that initiative on more traditional schools? So if you're seeing any signs of positive disruption towards greater inclusion in the system. So, ¿podrías contarnos más sobre la iniciativa de escuelas abiertas que busca involucrar a las comunidades en espacios de educación inclusiva durante periodos vacacionales o fines de semana? ¿Cómo se aborda la inclusión en estos espacios y qué impacto crees que está teniendo esta iniciativa en las escuelas más tradicionales? Si ustedes ven señales de que sí está, como lo que está pasando en la escuela abierta, está impactando lo que pasa en la escuela regular.
Sí, cómo no. Oye, a la mañana Tim decía, vamos a la acción. Y es lo que hicimos. Fuimos a la acción, pero la acción basada desde la perspectiva de la inclusión haciendo. ¿Qué significa eso? Cuando una maestra hace una ronda y pudo incluir a chicos que de todas las capacidades y se da cuenta que era muy simple y muy sencillo, esa capacitación vale más que 7.000 horas de cognición. Entonces, lo que hicimos fue gestionar y generar puentes para abrir la escuela los días sábados, porque los chicos de clases más desfavorecidas no tienen dónde ir en vacaciones. Y en la escuela dotamos con mucha calidad de todos los materiales deportivos, artísticos, tecnológicos, todo aquello que esos chicos no pueden hacer y no van a hacer en su experiencia escolar, llevamos a los días de vacaciones y tuvimos la posibilidad de incluir a todos, absolutamente todos los chicos que querían participar de todas las clases sociales y con cualquier posibilidad. Y la experiencia fue muy impactante porque detrás de los chicos vinieron los padres venían las abuelas, y cuando los maestros descubrieron que en ese proceso de integración había una riqueza comunitaria, el entusiasmo fue tal que muchas escuelas que en un primer momento rechazaron la posibilidad, hoy nos están pidiendo formar parte. Ha generado una dinámica comunitaria muy importante, muy fuerte, y también hemos mostrado un nuevo modo de aprender y un nuevo modo de enseñar, que se basa primero en la generación de espacios de confianza. Confianza de la maestra, donde ella sabe cómo tratar y cómo acercarse. Confianza de los niños, que saben cómo introducir y cómo involucrarse y cómo gestionar grupo. Esto ha traído que en distintas comunidades se desarrollen actividades que nunca antes podían haber sido pensadas y que nos hubiera tomado muchísimo tiempo hacerlo desde la visión curricular tradicional. Voy a poner solo un ejemplo. En una comunidad muy lejana, en el centro del Chaco, hoy hay 9 niños que están estudiando música, donde la música nunca había llegado. Entonces, es un proceso, es un fenómeno disruptivo porque sale del esquema del currículum tradicional y se mete en la experiencia vital de la cotidianeidad y se mete en la experiencia vital del deporte, del arte, que es un lenguaje humano común para todos. Y en ese lenguaje humano común, que es el arte y el deporte, gestionamos la confianza que después se puede trasladar a estos otros espacios. Y esa es la experiencia donde involucramos a 150 escuelas, más de 11.000 niños participaron de esta experiencia en todo el Paraguay. En toda la geografía tenemos 17 departamentos, en todos los departamentos han participado y también han participado distintos actores, gobernadores, intendentes, que es muy importante involucrar al poder político. Y hemos abierto las escuelas para que ellos también formen parte y traigan sus programas que normalmente se desarrollan pero no siempre tienen mucha convocatoria. Entonces fue un programa realmente muy sinérgico y ahora pensamos extenderlo, ampliarlo, llevarlo más allá de estas 150 y ojalá podamos llegar ya a 1.000 escuelas en unas alianzas muy importantes que estamos teniendo y queremos desarrollar porque creemos que esta es una modalidad mucho más rápida para mostrar en la experiencia, en la vida cotidiana, lo que significa la inclusión.
Okay.
Sorry.
Muchas gracias. I really, it was a good test for my ability to write quickly. So so the minister shared that you know, he wanted to start by sort of going to what you had said earlier this morning around the need to move into action, and that's what they really wanted to do in Paraguay, that action based on doing inclusion, right? So not just thinking or talking about it, but actually doing it. And so he mentioned, you know, again, when a teacher has like one class that is, you know, where they experience inclusion and the experience of leading a class that is inclusive, that is worth more than 7,000 hours of time spent thinking about it, right? So that one day of doing it is worth more than 7,000 hours of thinking about it. And so they open the schools on Saturdays, and especially in communities where young people had fewer resources and that they might not have access to activities during summer vacation. So that's how it began over those sort of vacation periods. You know, they've created sort of hub schools in communities where everyone from around those communities can come together and have access to really rich learning opportunities. They include everyone, no matter their socioeconomic status, no matter their ability, no matter their language, and they can come together. And they've seen like a real impact that not just the young people came, but their parents came, their grandparents came. And when teachers started to see the community engagement, and that this was really enriching what was happening in the community and in the learning process and the connection with teachers, they started asking to be involved. So teachers were the ones who were then asking to be involved. And again, you know, he mentioned that they've really shown a new way to teach and to learn, and that's based on trust and trusting relationships, and that's trust in teachers, that teachers will know what to do with supports, trust in young people, and young people will know sort of what to do. And then also really emphasized new types of activities and learning opportunities that were sort of unimagined before, and especially again in these really under-resourced communities. And he gave an example of one community, ¿cómo se llamaba? Cachaco. Okay, the community of Cachaco?
Chaco.
Chaco, okay, Chaco, where they had young people involved in music that had never had the opportunity to be involved in music before, and now it's become sort of a part of their daily life, a part of their lived experience, and that's really the kind of disruption that this has been able to create. They're working, they worked in the past in 150 schools with 11,000 children. They're hoping to scale up to 600 schools this year and 1,000 schools, I think, the following year. And then he mentioned the importance of bringing in, so they're working in districts across the country, and he mentioned the importance of bringing in sort of the political power, so governors and other sort of political administrative actors into this, and creating space for them too to bring in their own programs. So if they have local programs, that open school can become a place for the implementation of that local program, and that has brought additional sort of buy-in and support for the work that they're doing. ¿Perdí algo?
But it was good.
Oh, okay.
We're done.
Okay. Now, Minister Zialor, I'm going to turn to you, and you mentioned this in your opening remarks, right? That just saying the disruption of being in a disruptive space for education, which is in the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Family, and that gives you this sort of special type of role, right? In terms of positive disruption, not having to fit the work that you do into those traditional spaces. We heard from the minister in Paraguay talk about the importance of being able to work in spaces that are not necessarily within rigid, traditional types of schooling. So could you tell us a bit more about how you're working for inclusion in those outside of school spaces, how this has impacted inclusion within the school? So things you're doing through your work outside of schools that you've been able to see change in schools themselves.
I'm not sure whether we have been able to see change in schools, but like I said, education to us is taking a broader perspective of education. I think we need to start there, thinking what really and for whom is the system for. Sometimes I think our systems are for machines and not people. So it's getting to the basics. It's really about the basics. It's going to the basics, and in the other group I was talking about that terminology I use now. It's having system for human beings and not human doings. So it's redefining that, and it's the strong collaboration that Family Department under my portfolio has with the Ministry of Education, because that needs to be, first of all, educating society, educating communities before you go into schools. We really need, and with local government as well, it's getting that, and having programs, for example, that we have, which is simple, just going on a massive national campaign about respect and tolerance. Because this is why we have so many problems that we have now. It's lack of respect and tolerance. It's the basics, which is human beings, that we have it naturally. It is natural. Diversity is a law of nature. It's just getting rid of, I think schools should be a place where you go to get rid of social conditioning. That's my, and it's re-educating people, everybody, the lawmakers, parliament, politicians, everyone, the elders in the community, people who are influential in society. It's bringing them and we're targeting specific young people, because they're not the leaders of tomorrow, they're the leaders of now. And getting that into the spaces outside of school, first, yes, in the school, but also in communities and in sports. We're using that a lot in sports, in getting that education, a new approach to education, so that then eventually the educators will embrace, because it will be a part of society. It will be cultural. It will be normal. Otherwise it's like tokenism. It is just we get somebody who looks different than us, who act different with different abilities. Tokenism, just to tick a box or just to make us look cool. So it's that, and also challenging. Like I've been talking to everybody who listened to me for the past 2 days about the FIFA World Cup event that we will be doing in Seychelles next year. And using platforms such as this and challenging these huge organizations as well into bringing real education about respect and tolerance, because at the basic of it is just, making sure that every single human being, not the human doing, their needs are met. I mean, this is what, we're inventing all the big words, We are putting into different boxes, I think it was, I learned something this morning, pigeonholes. That was a terminology. We don't need that. If we go to the basics, remembering, I mean, you know, why we come into this blue and green planet in the first place. This is the kind of education, and you won't put that in the curriculum. It doesn't belong in the curriculum. It belongs in everyday life, in the action, in the doing. This is where, you know, being disruptive and bring that, and I have a radio program that I talk about this on the radio, to be able to reach, and it reaches a lot of population, and also bridging the gap between, you know, the elderly who had these values and young people, and then bringing these programs and the projects, because this is where you get the parents, and this is where you get everybody else who's influential in society, and then to influence the system. It's actually just the basics, going back to the basics of, so that I was telling that, I will tell all of you as well, I told that in the other room, saying, none of you are normal. You think you are, you're not. True. So, you know, when I tell people I'm normal and they laugh at me, I say, you laugh, you are as abnormal as I am. So, and there should never be anything normal about anyone, because we are unique. This is science. I mean, science teaches us a lot of things, technology, but for what? It should improve our lives. It should improve the quality of life. It should improve our emotional experience, how we feel about each other, how we make each other feel. That's the education. How are we making other? Do you feel respected? Do you feel loved? Do you feel valued? You know, I had somebody, sorry, I'm going to mention her, telling me, oh, you pull off this color. I wish I could have the confidence. And I say, why do you need permission? I think I heard a word this morning. Be unapologetic about being a human being.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Come to this side, and I'm going to shift us a little. We talked about purpose. We talked about positive disruption, trying to bring inclusion into the system. And then, you know, as we know, in order to really start to transform systems, we need to think about the multiple components that make up systems, and how do we bring those into alignment around the shared purpose, and build off of some of the disruption to bring the other pieces into play. And those pieces could be teacher training, pedagogy, school and educational leadership, school infrastructure, curriculum, ed tech, financing, information assessment systems, family engagement, and I could continue to go on and on. But would like to start with you again, Commissioner, and ask, you know, if you could give us an idea of how you've been working across these different components of the system in Minnesota in terms of trying to really align around inclusion. If there are some parts of the system that you've prioritized and said we should start here first, some parts that have been easier to bring into that sort of alignment around inclusion, some parts that have been harder. What's that process been like for you all?
So Jen, before I answer the question, I really want to say I just want to hang out with you.
Anytime, you got it. And better in Seychelles. Come to Seychelles.
I was going to say, last night she invited us all to Seychelles, so we can all...
So yes, please. Jen, to answer your question, I think I just first want to shed some light on a promising trend that's happening in the state of Minnesota. And I think everybody in this room will know the terminology that I'm about to use. And it's unified programming and unified schools. Okay. And I'm going to read something that everybody knows. According to the Special Olympics website, unified schools give educators, students, administrators, and coaches the power to create a more inclusive world and help end the stigma around intellectual disabilities. And so the reason I read that is, in Minnesota, we're just committed to developing more unified programming in our schools. Through this commitment, something I believe is we've seen a steady increase in inclusion for students with disabilities. And our statistics show this. It shows a year-to-year rise in the number and percentage of students spending 80% or more of their school day in the general education setting. And I want you to consider this. Over 10% of our 5 to 18-year-old students with developmental coordination disorder, referred to as DCD, in grades K through 12, are learning alongside their general education peers for the majority of their school day. This positive trajectory extends beyond DCD. It includes students with intellectual and developmental disabilities as well. One of the things I guess I want to throw out there, however, is achieving greater inclusion, it requires more than just those numbers. It demands mindset shifts. It demands dismantling of silos within our education systems. Doesn't matter if you're in the state of Minnesota or if you're somewhere else across the world. Okay. I think we must continue to learn from the current practices to further increase inclusion, not just for Minnesota students, but for students everywhere. One of the challenges that I think we all face is building inclusive communities for students with disabilities, even beyond their school years. Okay? This challenge is particularly evident in education and the employment opportunities for post-graduation. I think we need our communities to come together, explore avenues for providing the meaningful employment and the livelihood of our young folks. And I think by doing so, we're going to enable them to live independently as possible within their communities and within their families. And I think these opportunities will allow them to contribute actively within their communities and actually feel valued as individuals. And lastly, I think in essence, it's about fostering an environment where every member feels included. When I say member, I'm talking about young people. Where every young person feels included, empowered, valued, respected. And I think together we're just working towards creating these type of communities where everyone has a chance to thrive, to strive, and make meaningful contributions to this society or this world that we live in.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And Minister Wadima, I feel like it's been a long time since we were chatting on this side. How about in Malawi? We had some interesting conversations in our pre-talk about the work that you've been doing and some of the challenges and what you've identified as the missing pieces still in terms of those components of the system that really need to align around inclusion. So could you share with us sort of what's been going on in Malawi?
Yeah, so firstly, I would say it's not easy to do both. Sorry, I just tried to say that you are right to intimate that dealing with inclusion needs a systems approach. And you are also right to point out that some parts are easier than others. Others are difficult to move in the direction of inclusive education. There's some stuff that we are doing right. And I think from this discussion, from this meeting, there's a lot that we are going to take home. There's a lot that we've learned from. And some of them, it's not so much about financing, but it's just changing how we think. It's about mindset change. So this has been very enriching and very insightful. I'll just tell you a few things, and I hope I have time. The things that we've been doing, pursuing activities including the following to make sure that we're being inclusive, including having a fully fledged directorate in the ministry that just looks at inclusivity. We're increasing domestic funding towards implementation of inclusive education, diversifying training modes for special teachers to increase output and meet the increasing demand in the schools. We have intensified continuous professional development to strengthen support. We have modified examinations to make sure that we suit the needs of various categories of learners with special needs and disabilities. And we apply an inclusive selection process so that any student with special needs and disabilities who meet minimum requirements are selected to universities. So we don't put them in the same category as those that we know don't have the diverse needs. Malawi has adopted what we call a twin track approach to service delivery, meaning that most learners with special educational needs, including those with disabilities, are learning in inclusive setting, while those with severe special educational needs are in special settings as our education systems move towards full inclusion. Because it's not, we can't say it's at full inclusion, but like I said, there's a lot that we have learned here. So since I have already highlighted areas where we are making good progress, I will now focus on the parts where it's challenging for us, i.e. Having limited financing for infrastructure development to enable a construction of model resource centers and renovate existing infrastructure to support learners with diverse needs in mainstream schools, limited capacity in inclusive education to offer the necessary services to all institutions is a major challenge. Stigma and discrimination remain a major challenge which requires coordinated efforts, including with communities. So we have a lot of work to do with mindset change. Like I said, as I started, that we have a Malawi vision 2063 that the whole country is rallying behind, where we're talking about not leaving anyone behind. And for us, I think I would say that we also have some good laws, including the Disability Act that has just been passed. But it's now like what the commissioner said, that it shouldn't just be buzzwords. It shouldn't just be something that we feel about going to a conference, whatever, but we need to all be seen to really riding behind what we are saying, and it can't be business as usual. We have to be walking the talk. So the narrow framing of special needs, which results in misidentification and grouping of learners with diverse functional needs together, thereby making support irrelevant or ineffective. As I conclude, we can borrow from engineering, I would say, by designing for the worst case scenario, which will mean to plan and implement education that provides opportunity to all learners, starting with those with special needs and disabilities, by at least catering to most of their needs. This means the curriculum, school infrastructure, teaching and learning materials, teacher training and support, and assessments are fit for purpose or accommodate all, from policy to practice. Together, we can explore innovative financing for inclusive education. There's no full-scale and universal access to education. It is not inclusive enough. Therefore, we need to collaborate and deliberately establish new funding streams for inclusive education. In this regard, I would like to comment the collaboration on inclusive education. I would like to commend the collaboration on inclusive education between Special Olympics, GPE, and Brookings Institute to intensify advocacy. Together for a better education outcomes for all. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you all. I think that we've done a good job of being on time to have questions. So would love to open the floor to questions. My colleague Kelsey has the microphone there. So if anyone would like to ask a question to our distinguished panel, please raise your hand. I see one back there.
While we're waiting for the mic to get back there, we do have a question from online. The question is, there's been a lot of talk about including students and children with IDD, but what about including teachers with IDD?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Ben Pogo. I'm the Director of Inclusive Education, Ministry of General Education and Instruction, the Republic of South Sudan. I would want to ask a question, but I would also want to make a comment regarding what our dear great educators at the high level, the high table have said. Number one, I am visually impaired, as you know. The UN Convention, Article 24, when it was being drafted, I was one of the advocates for inclusive education on the basis that special needs education has been very discriminative and isolative. And the pressure for Article 24 to be enshrined in the convention, a lot came from persons with disabilities because of this negative representation of persons with disabilities in society. Now, what I'm saying is that for better, for worse, we want to go inclusive. We have seen that I personally, if I was to go on in a special school, I would never have reached where I am. So far, I'm a teacher, a graduate, master's degree holder, and I'm still going for PhD. Great. So, and this is because I went through special needs education. Sure. Secondly, I mean, because I didn't go through special needs education. I went through inclusive education. I want to give a second scenario. We have one person who is physically impaired, no limbs at all, only the body, the upper body, and the head. And very interestingly, he is in secondary level of education, writing using his mouth, and he is very intelligent. We are encouraging him to be a role model in the future in terms of inclusive education, so that nobody with disability cannot be educated in an inclusive school environment. This person, when he first went to the school, he was seen as an object of pity and sympathy. But 3 months later, every child, every teacher respected this person, and he's enjoying his education in an inclusive environment. Let us have a paradigm shift from special needs education to inclusive education. And I mean full inclusive education, because it is workable for us, people with disabilities. The question I would want to pose to our dear Minister of Education from Malawi is, how would you really run the two systems concurrently, knowing that special needs education will put somebody in school restricted environment for 8 years or 12 years, and then going back to the community, he would not be accepted because he does not know how to behave there, and because the community doesn't actually value him. How do you reconcile this? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If we have one more question, maybe we... Sorry. You can ask.
No. He was asking someone a question, but I was going to ask the question about the online person. So.
Okay. I was going to see if there's one more question, and then maybe we could answer some of these. But is there another question at the moment? Okay, I see Tim's raising his hand. Okay. I don't see any other hands raised right now, Tim, so please go ahead.
I just think it's a great moment that we're here at the same time the finance ministers are here. And I just think if we could have an open conversation about what it's going to take to get to a minimum of a 3% commitment, and then from a 3% commitment, which is just proportionate to the representation of people with intellectual developmental challenges in the population. What is it going to take to get to that? And if we all left here and we marched down the street to the finance ministers, what would we have to say to convince them that the resources that are necessary must be allocated?
Thank you. Okay, so we will start with those three questions. So if there's any minister, commissioner, you wanted to jump in. So our three questions are teachers with intellectual and developmental disabilities, how to run two systems concurrently, understanding that one of them is essentially restrictive and exclusionary, and then what can we say to try to convince finance ministers and others to dedicate more to inclusive education. Does anyone want to jump in? Sorry, you wanted to jump in first, so go ahead.
Not sure if I wanted to jump in first, but
now you will.
The online question that I thought I heard was for teachers. And so they always tell you when somebody asks a question, you never talk about self, but I need to go ahead and go there for a hot second. As an African-American male in the education system across this country, you don't necessarily see me, okay, whether it's as a teacher, whether it's as a principal, an administrator, or whatever. And there was this one time where I was a principal in a predominantly white setting or school, and I walked into a class and a young person asked me, what's it like to be the only African-American male in our community as the lead person? And then she said, it's about time, because it was the first time that she'd ever been exposed or had an interaction with a black man in her educational journey, and she was a senior in high school. That question that you got from online, or that you received from online, it's about time. We talk about multiple perspectives. We talk about people's virtuosities, and there's things for all of us to be able to learn from each other. And that question for me, the way I received it, it's not just the students that have the same experience as that teacher that we're talking about, or that individual. It's about others within that educational setting that need, and I use that word need, to be exposed, need to experience someone that is different from them. And that's how we all grow. That's how we all prosper, and that's what makes the world go round and makes us better. And so for that particular question, that is something that I would love to explore, and I think it's something that we need to do.
Thank you. Thank you.
¿Sí?
Ministra,
Ok.
sí, adelante.
Quiero compartir a partir de mi experiencia una idea que resume un poco todas las situaciones. En todo este tiempo, a mi juicio, comenzamos por el hacer, comenzamos por las leyes, comenzamos por el currículum, es decir, intentamos acciones que están fuera de lo humano. Para mí el factor definitivo en la inclusión es partir de la emocionalidad. Si hay algo que yo no puedo incluir en mi emocionalidad, que yo no puedo aceptar desde la legitimidad del encuentro con el otro, eso no va a existir. Entonces no hay planes, no hay financiamiento, no hay nada que pueda existir si algo no puede ser incluido en ese ámbito emocional. Entonces, esa experiencia que habla el ministro de Minnesota, esa experiencia que hay que desarrollar es una experiencia emocional. Tengo que poder vivir, tengo que poder experimentar, tengo que poder desarrollar una experiencia humana como acto central de la inclusión. Todo lo demás viene solo, todo lo demás viene después. Es más, en mi experiencia de encuentro de todas las personas que trabajan en inclusión es porque han tenido o tienen una experiencia emocional que les motiva. Entonces tenemos que empezar a entender que todo lo que hacemos en la vida, todo, y la educación también debería tener un currículum que empiece contemplando las emociones. Las emociones no son solamente si estoy triste o feliz, sino es el motor, es lo que va a motorizar nuestro aprendizaje y lo que va a motorizar la existencia humana. Entonces, todas nuestras acciones para poder incluir al maestro, para poder incluir al niño, para poder transformar, para poder tener una comunidad, tienen que poder tener como base un aspecto del desarrollo emocional basado sobre todo en la posibilidad de incluir al otro y de incluir lo otro, que es diferente a mí.
Thank you. So the minister mentioned that sort of from his experience and his idea that sort of the conversation that we've been having can be summed up in a few ways, and said that, you know, we often start in our inclusive education work with laws, with curriculum, with the sort of doing, and I think similar to what Minister, you had mentioned before, that this is really sort of outside of the human experience, right? And so there are things that are outside of us as humans, and that if we were to start instead with this emotional level, with the very human, basic humanness of meeting another person and having that sort of person-to-person, human-to-human meeting, that's where we need to start. That not with all the money in the world, nor by changing the curriculum, are we really going to advance if we don't advance in this sort of basic human emotional level. He talked about, you know, the experience that, Commissioner, that you talked about in Minnesota, that really it's about being humans and that emotional piece around being able to live, being able to have a human experience. And shared that from his perspective, people who work in inclusion, that it's usually because they have had an emotional connection, an emotional experience that has connected them in some way with inclusive education. And so I started writing really messy at this point. Okay, I think, yes. So he talked about education, starting with emotions and not whether we're happy or sad, but emotions really as the motor, the driver of human existence, and that this should be the basis for our work in inclusion. So. Minister, I don't know if you want to
Yes,
jump in.
yes, I have a question. Actually, it's specific to the Ministry of Education in Malawi, so I have to take it. Yeah, we had a question from the Director of Inclusive, I think it's Inclusive Education. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the country, but
South Sudan.
South Sudan, yes. And in a way, I'm glad that it's somebody that has special needs that is heading, I think, that directorate, because then he understands better the needs of the people that he has to serve. So these are the kind of moves, I think these are the kind of things we also need to be making a lot, because the person that's in that situation understands the situation better and then can actually handle the situation better. And I'm very glad that in South Sudan, he managed to get the education that he did to put him where he is, to actually now lead and be where he can actually be very transformative, where we can all pray that we get the change that we're looking for. And just like Commissioner said here, it's about time that most of these things do happen, not just walk, but walking the talk. We're actually late. Just to answer the question, just to say that we in Malawi are actually transitioning from SEND, which is the Special Education Needs and Disability Education, to inclusive education. And I agree with you, Director, that this is the way to go, from special education needs and disability to an all-inclusive schools, so that these learners are part of the society, are part of the community, of the education system, just like all the other learners. And thank you very much for that very important question.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. I think we won't have time to really dig into this now, but I'm going to encourage everyone to maybe reflect on this in conversations that you have during the reception and in other spaces that happen beyond today. But you know, in one of the workshops I was in, we talked about this. It's like that transition. How do we plan? We need to be more planful and intentional about that transition, because often we sort of say we're going to go from special education and mainstream education and then jump to inclusive education. But we need to support schools, teachers, families, learners, everyone to make that transition, and that's often a piece that gets sort of left out. But we can't, I think, as you know, the question that came from our colleague in South Sudan, you know, I think we can't not have the aspiration, right? The aspiration has to be, and we have to move with urgency and all of the impatience and all of that we talked about before.
I think maybe I'd like to
yes.
make a comment about that.
Please do.
Like you said, Jen. Jumping from one system to the next. I say scrap it all. I'm getting myself in trouble here. But I say scrap it all and back to the basics. Let me just describe, you know, things, because from listening to what everybody is talking about here, I want to challenge and I want to disrupt the room a little bit, because you're too quiet. It's somebody with like we're terming now, we're categorizing people, and I don't like that. Disability, with the intellectual disability, physical disability, you know, all the terms that we said, and there are people who we will no physical disability, no intellectual, whatever, they are more disabled than my friend Maggie here.
Yep.
You agree?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very true.
exactly. So
true.
because of whatever else with the upbringing and some trauma that they face that disable them to do whatever, or to be the best version of themselves. And I think we need to disrupt at that level, at the fundamental level. It's just have a system, or no system. Why systems? You know, just have a way of living and of engaging with each other, because that's what education is about, of engaging with each other in that way. And then that will answer your question about financing. You don't have to then measure 3% or whatever percentage. It is come up with programs and projects. I don't have the problem in Seychelles, because you're given, you know, your budget by Minister for Finance. It's up to you to make it inclusive or whatever it is. I prefer the word diversity. Embracing diversity,
Yes.
You know, of every single human being, and then making the shift of the thing that we have to do is to make human doing become human being. This is what we need to do, and I think if we, I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I'm not normal. I warned you. So yes, so it's getting to that really basic, going back to the basics. I think if we do that, sometimes we're entangled in, make it intellectual and academic and everything, but basics, the basics, you know, the science of a human being.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to bring this panel and discussion to a close. And again, as I say, we'll have time in the reception and really encourage those of you who are here in person with us today to continue this conversation with the ministers and amongst yourselves, and those of you who are joining us online in the multiple spaces that hopefully we will find ourselves in to keep talking about this. So thank you, Minister Ramirez, muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you, Minister Zialor. Thank you, Commissioner Jett, and thank you, Minister Widima, so much for being here. It is now my great pleasure to welcome my very close colleague, Khadim Hussein, to the stage. Khadim has been working with us at Brookings. We've been very lucky for the past 12 years. He's an Echidna Global Scholar alumni from the second generation of Echidna Global Scholars in 2012, and has been my very great teacher in thinking about inclusive education. And so Khadim will be the moderator for the final panel. Thank you. Sorry, I think we're going to move chairs. And I
Okay. Do you hear me? Okay. So, I was telling you that you might be quite very tired and looking towards closing, but I was telling you that no, you have the people you are talking about the whole day. So I want to extend a warm welcome again to each of you to this closing significant panel discussion on education system transformation for and through inclusive education, convened by the Brookings Institution for Universal Education in collaboration with the Special Olympics and Global Partnership for Education. I'm Khadim Hussain, 2012 Echidna Global Scholar of the CUE Brookings, and I also leading a nonprofit organization, Grace Association, which works for empowerment of marginalized communities in Pakistan. As a person with disability, my journey has been one of deep transformative engagement with the grassroots, rooted in the mountains of Skardu in northern Pakistan. I went to school in a wheelbarrow with my village friends. I faced so many social stigmas throughout my primary education, but I didn't give up. So after years of advocacy, I was then able to champion for the cause of inclusive girls' education. I have spearheaded initiatives promoting gender equality, providing education and skills development opportunities to girls and youth with disabilities. So my experience, including being honored as the Echidna Global Scholar by the esteemed Brookings Institution, have shaped my commitment to driving transformative changes in education. Today, we stand here with a critical juncture where inclusive education is not merely a goal, but a moral imperative. As we navigate this terrain, it's essential to acknowledge the voices of those directly impacted by our decisions, the children and individuals with disabilities, whose future hinge on the inclusivity of our educational system. This discussion is of paramount importance as we talk around the pressing issues faced by children and individuals with disabilities, particularly through an intersectional lens of gender and disability. We are here to explore pathways towards education system transformation for and through inclusive education, a topic close to my heart and vital for creating equitable societies. In this closing session, we have honored to have two outstanding youth panelists joining us. Each of them have wealth of experience and passion for fostering inclusive environment within the mainstream education system. First, we have Kate from California. Kate's journey towards educating meaningful inclusion began over 6 years ago through her involvement with the Special Olympics. From serving as co-president of her high school unified club to becoming a global messenger, Kate has tirelessly promoted the importance of unified champion schools and the significance of participating in local Special Olympics events. Her direction to empowering voices and creating diverse environment on a global scale is a true inspiration. Joining Kate, we have Simoil Lara, also from Southern California. Sam's journey with Special Olympics spanned over 7 years, during which he has actively participated in unified sports and held leadership roles, including co-president of his high school unified club and U.S. Youth Ambassador. Sam's commitment to spreading inclusion and kindness echoes through his advocacy efforts, making him a beacon of leadership within the unified generation. So without any further ado, I would like to ask a few questions to our outstanding panelists, starting with Sam first and then Kate. So my first question is to Sam and Kate, is thank you for joining this closing ceremony session. So could you please introduce yourself and share a bit about your background as a Special Olympics youth leader, as well as why inclusion is so important for you? Kate, you go first. Sam, yeah.
Go ahead, Sam.
Hi, my name is Samuel Lahr, and I am 19 years old, and I have been working for inclusive education for almost 7 years, primarily through Special Olympics and Unified Champion Schools program. I started in high school playing unified basketball and unified bocce. I was the team manager for unified soccer and track and field. Additionally, I participated in community programs. Since high school, I had held leadership roles. I was the co-president for Unified Club in high school, a U.S. Youth Ambassador from 2021 to 2023. And currently, I serve as a global master for Special Olympics, Southern California. Inclusion is important to me because it gave me the opportunity to keep spreading inclusion and kindness around the world.
Great job, Sammy. Hello, everyone. My name is Kate Gonzalez, and I have been involved with inclusive education for a little over 6 years now with Sammy. I first got involved by joining a unified club my freshman year of high school. A unified club unites students with and without intellectual disabilities to promote social inclusion on campus. I fell in love with the club because of how accepting everyone was and decided to become co-president. So when Sammy and I were co-presidents of this club, we educated staff, students, and several city councils about the various abilities we have on campus. We did this by hosting weekly club gatherings and fun events like an Inclusion Spirit Week. Sammy and I then became youth ambassadors for Special Olympics North America. That was for 2 years. Sammy and I are now on Southern California's Unified Generation Council and a unified pair of global messengers. Sammy and I emphasize the impact of participating in local inclusive education events and have successfully led several youth summits. I am honored to be on the Special Olympics Global Youth Leadership Council, where we aim to empower everyone's voices, create more diverse environments, and promote the inclusion revolution globally. Inclusion is important to me because I see firsthand how impactful it is when we embrace everyone's differences and build long-lasting friendships. I want a world where people like Sam and my younger brother do not have to fight for their place in this world. Witnessing Sammy, who has become my best friend, and my little brother being outcasted because of their differences made me want to be a bigger advocate for a more inclusive world.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. With that, thank you both. Now, my second question is to Kate and then Smile. What barriers to inclusion do you feel there currently are in terms of providing access to education, supports, recreation, and any other areas you want to talk about?
So now that Sammy and I are recent high school graduates, we noticed that there is little opportunity for peers our age to participate in inclusive events. Coming from a high school that had implemented the 3 elements of a unified champion school, we realized the opportunities to create friendships with and without intellectual disabilities are limited as we leave, which is a social barrier. Sam and I make an effort to continue volunteering in inclusive education events and stay connected with our community. We hope more people become aware of the importance of inclusive education and take action. How about you, Sammy?
I am currently in an adult transition school where I can continue to advocate for inclusion in my communities. There is a financial barrier because it costs a lot of money for sporting equipment and transportation. It would be nice to have more facilities for sports and recreation globally, because sports help us in many ways. Sports help me stay healthy, be a good teammate, and make new friends. If I did not attend a school with a focus on inclusive education, I would not be here speaking to you all today. This school program allowed me to build inclusion, lead to my full potential. I will always be thankful that I attended an inclusive school that changed my life for the better. And I want everyone to experience the happiness I felt.
Right.
Thank you.
Good. Good. Is your okay? So the last question. Again, I would start with Sam, and then you both. After Sam, Kate will respond. That what insight have you gained today, and how can we collectively apply these lessons beyond this event and within our communities?
Want to go first, Sam?
Yeah,
Yes.
you go first.
Today has been wonderful. It has been an honor to be here today and connecting with you. I have learned a lot through all the sections and discussion we had today. The section I learned the most from was engaging family of students with disability and school, because I learned I can achieve anything with the right support in place and the right team that advocates for my needs. Today has really emphasized that what we do now affects what the world will be like tomorrow. Being Sue who had the opportunity to attend an inclusive school has really changed my life. Inclusive education benefits all students, students with ID and mainstream students, both in and out of the classrooms. I have benefited firsthand from being in a community that ensured nobody got left out. I could participate in fun events like movie nights, which grew my social skills. While I have had the opportunity to develop these skills, I know many of my global peers do not. It is important that we extend inclusive opportunities to more young people with and without intellectual disability, so that they can also develop interpersonal and leadership skills like I have.
Sam and I have both really grown as students, leaders, and advocates because of our access to an inclusive education program. We know that inclusion in schools goes beyond just the classroom. Research shows that inclusion makes more positive school climate, leads to reduced bullying, and higher levels of respect for those with intellectual disabilities. Being a part of a school that prioritized and exemplified inclusion has really made me who I am today. It is evident that true inclusion in education requires all of us in this room, from youth to teachers to policymakers and the community. We all have a role to play in fostering a more inclusive educational environment. Young people need to develop inclusive mindsets and encourage our peers to be included socially. Policymakers need to support legislation that ensures equal access to education for all students. Funders need to prioritize initiatives that promote inclusivity in schools and our communities. Teachers need to provide their students with and without intellectual disabilities to play and learn together. School administrations need to provide their students and teachers with the opportunity for inclusivity training. We must ensure that inclusive practices are not just ideals on paper, but a reality in every institution. And that only happens when all of these stakeholders come together and fight to make schools more accepting for students with and without intellectual disabilities. Sam and I want to challenge everyone in this room to act, whether it's advocating for policy change, implementing inclusive practices in your classrooms, or supporting organizations that champion inclusivity. We must accept that it is our collective responsibility to make the change for the youth all over the world. Only by coming together and accepting our challenge can we create a truly inclusive future where everyone, regardless of their ability, can learn, grow, and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate and Sam. With these youth leaders, I have to submit a call to action on behalf of people with disabilities. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished researchers, policymakers, funders, and members of the global community. Today, I stand before you not only as an individual, but as a voice for millions who are often silenced by the shadows of exclusion within our education system. As a person with a disability, I have traversed the erratic paths of discrimination and inequality, witnessing firsthand the plight of those who are marginalized and overlooked, especially in rural areas, high poverty contexts, like in my country, Pakistan. In these forgotten corners of the world, the barriers to education are not merely obstacles. They are formidable fortresses fortified by the intersecting walls of gender inequality, poverty, and disability discrimination. I have seen young girls with disabilities relegated to the fringe of society, their potential stifled by the oppressive weight of tradition and neglect. In these communities, the promises of policy crafted in distant centralized offices often evaporate before they can take roots in parched soil of reality. Despite noble intentions and lofty declarations, the transformative power of inclusive education remains an elusive dream for the most of children with disabilities. The gap between policy rhetoric and practical implementation is wide, swallowing the hopes and aspirations of those it was meant to uplift. For all the disabled children, especially girls with disabilities in rural, impoverished regions, especially in the global south, the journey to education is troubled with peril. They navigate crumbling infrastructure, inaccessible facilities, and dearth of assistive technologies with courage and resilience. Yet even their indomitable spirit is not match the systemic barriers that conspire to keep them shackled to the margins of society. We cannot stand idly by as these injustices persist. It is binding upon each and every one of us to heed the call of conscience and act with urgency. We must bridge the chasm between policy and practice, bringing the transformative vision of inclusive education to life in every corner of our world. This demands a multifaceted approach. We need to invest in accessible infrastructure, provide training for teachers, and develop inclusive curricula that reflect the diversity of human experience. We must engage communities in dialogue, challenge stereotypes, and foster a culture of acceptance and belonging. So, to researchers, I urge you to delve deeper into the complexities of inclusive education, seeking innovative solutions that address the diverse needs of all learners, especially the girls with disabilities. To policymakers, I appeal for bold actions in enacting policies that actively dismantle barriers and ensure the full participation of individuals with disabilities in education. To funders, I call upon you to invest in initiatives for education system transformation for and through inclusive education on a global scale. And to the general public of the global community, I implore you to stand in solidarity with those who are marginalized, advocating for inclusion in your schools, communities, and workplaces. Together, let us embark on this journey towards a more inclusive future where every individual could learn, grow, and thrive to their fullest potential. Your actions today will shape the world tomorrow. And it is our collective responsibility to ensure that no one is left behind by transforming the education system for and through inclusive education globally. Thank you. Thank you, Kate and Sam. Word to Jen.
Thank you. No, you can stay. It's okay. Karim. I just want to say thank you again. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah,
thank you,
thank you.
Kate. Thank you, Sam, for this great last panel. Thank you to all of you for being here, those of you who are in person, for tuning in, those of you who are tuning in online. This is the end of a long day of rich conversations. It's not the end of the work. We all know that. The work continues and continues, we hope, with more vigor after this. You know, Tim had asked me a few weeks ago what I thought might be sort of the signs of success for this event. And I had said, I hope that everyone has the opportunity to learn, unlearn, and relearn. That everyone has had the opportunity to meet someone new, to make a new connection in this work that we're doing together that needs all of us. And number 3, to come away with at least one idea for action. And I'm going to add to that, after our conversation with the ministers as well, one idea for being differently that moves us in the direction of inclusion. So thank you all. Thank you all so much. Thank you to our partners in Special Olympics and Global Partnership for Education. Thank you.